There we go. The recording is in progress, and we're all sorts of legal when it comes to Zoom. How are you, Chad?
I'm great.
That's good.
Sean.
How's life in Colorado today?
It's pretty hot. Yeah, we're in the high 90s, so we're hitting a lot of record heat, but a lot of smoke out there from the western states. Still kind of cloud in the skies, but overall, I'm pretty good.
Well, I can't complain about the weather. I mean, we're recording this on September 10th, 2021, and I can't complain about the weather in New York City. So usually I can this time of year. Today I can't. So that's a good thing. So I want to jump into this. So first, I'm going to thank you for doing this. Second, I'm going to thank everybody for tuning in. Welcome to Did You Know That? ? The show where I get to talk to interesting people about interesting and sometimes annoying topics. And this one, I'm going to forewarn everybody, I'm going to fanboy out a little bit because Chad's got one of the cooler jobs out there. And I can't wait to talk to him about it and how he got into it and what have you. But before I do, I want to remind you that there is a subscribe button somewhere down there with the bell. So if you've enjoyed this episode or previous content, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And if you hit the bell, you'll be notified when new episodes or new material goes up on Thursday mornings. For those of you just joining who don't know me, my name is Sean O'Rourke. And when I am not talking to interesting people, I'm a cyber liability consultant for an insurance brokerage that is headquartered in New York City. So Chad, now you're going to fill in the folks as to who you are and what you do, and then we're going to dive right in.
Sounds great. Yeah, I'm Chad Schroeder. I live in Colorado, just outside of Boulder. My day job, I'm a civil engineer, but on the side, I work for CrossFit. I do all the sports or the statistics and research for the CrossFit games. So it's kind of a side job I've been doing with them for about almost over a decade now. So it's been really fun.
And while the civil engineer probably has some very interesting items to talk about, that is not why I brought you on the show. So we might mention it at some point again, but for the most part, we're here to talk about your role with CrossFit. You and I both practice the exercise methodology of CrossFit, but I am also a big geek when it comes to the CrossFit games. I've been watching them since we talked about this before, like 2011, 12. And then it wasn't until my wife told me that you two used to go to school together and that what your role was. So I figured, hey, who better to have on to geek out about CrossFit than the guy who actually keeps all the historical stats about the sport itself. So how the hell did you wind up doing that when you actually have a real day job?
Yeah, it's interesting. I started CrossFit in 2009, just doing it to work out. And I knew they had what's called the CrossFit Games, kind of the World Series Super Bowl of CrossFit that's held annually to determine who the fittest man and woman is. And so I started spring of 2009, and then they had the games that summer, and I didn't know anything about it, didn't watch it or anything, but kept working out with CrossFit. And then 2010, there was the qualifying stages to get to the games. I kind of participated on one of those as a team. I would compete, but just an average CrossFitter, not a super athlete or anything like that. But the games were then held that summer in 2010. I watched it. It was the first time they broadcasted it. It was just on the internet. And I remember just watching it. It was just Friday, Saturday, Sunday in 2010. And I was at work on Friday afternoon, and they were doing the teams competition. I just peeked in and was like, wow, this is really interesting, just watching coverage of it on TV. And then, so I went home that evening, and they had like the first individual events, and it was really epic events, and it just kind of hooked me. And then I spent the rest of that weekend just watching it online. I couldn't get enough of it. So that was really fun, just watching it online that year. And then in 2011, I volunteered to help out at one of the qualifying events to the games, which were called regionals. And at the time, the media coverage was pretty sparse still with CrossFit. At these qualifying events, all we had was basically Twitter, and we had video cameras and such, but it was all for taped highlights and such. There wasn't any live coverage of the regional events then. Right. So I would just tweet results and heats and stuff and names. So all the people in CrossFit that were following along could see how their favorite athletes were doing. So that was kind of my first foray into like media coverage of that. And so then the next year,
let me stop you real quick. Is that what you volunteered to do, or did you volunteer to sort of do what most people who follow the games or the sport see volunteers do, which is move weights out and equipment and what have you?
No, actually, I volunteered to do the media that year.
Okay.
I never done sports media before. General sports fan, kind of all the regular sports, football, baseball, kind of also cycling and some other sports I kind of follow. But I really like, after watching the games in 2010 online, it's like, oh, it's really fun to kind of work this behind the scenes. Sure. So just volunteered, and that was 2011. So just kind of was tweeting results. But then 2012 came around, same with the regional qualifying competitions for the games, and I figured it would be really great if I could put some context behind what's happening besides just the heat winners and such. So I did like spreadsheets and got past stats and such, results, best lifts, et cetera, from the athletes that were competing. And it went really well. So when we were tweeting, I had this background information, and it went really well. The CrossFit, the main headquarters, really liked what I was doing. And I actually got a call after it asking if I wanted to come out to Los Angeles and work the games doing the same basic thing. And I was like, sure, that'd be great. And it was so funny at the time, because I was thinking, well, I've got all my stats for this region. I'll go there and combine them with the stats of all the other regions that they have. And, I could help fill in. And then they kind of told me, we don't really have stats for all the other regions, so, or a consolidated combined one.
Right.
And that's kind of when the light bulb went off, like, wow, this is a need that needs to be filled. So I did the best I could, because the regionals were in June and the games were in July. So I had about a month to kind of just get the rough stats and research on all the qualifying athletes. Did that, went out to the games and worked for the first time in 2012. And it just took off from there. I worked like behind the scenes in the TV trucks, helping out with like who the athletes were, helping the announcers, et cetera. There's a lot to go into that if we want to.
Oh yeah, we will.
So that's how, I kind of got hooked. And then the next season, they said, hey, do you want to do this throughout the whole season? Because for CrossFit, there's 3 stages to get to the game. Well, there's some more stages now, but at the time, there was the Open, which anyone in the world can compete in. And from that, it was whittled down to regionals, which had 17 at the time around the world. And those are the qualifying events to go to the games. So I started helping with the coverage of the Open, regionals, and the games in 2013, kind of the full season. And from there, I've just continued to do the same every year. So the games that just happened this last August were the 10th games I worked. So
and we're going to get into that, because your job expanded because of these games for a very awesome reason. And we're going to talk about that. It's one of the reasons why CrossFit, I'm in love with the methodology, because of the expansiveness of who can do this and accomplish certain things. But first, we got to diverge, because the voice of CrossFit, a gentleman by the name of Sean Woodland, who is a professional play-by-play broadcaster, who has done, I forget how many of the CrossFit games.
10 as well. It's funny. We started we both started in 2012.
12. Okay. Yeah. I wasn't sure if he was 11 or 12, but I know he's been around a while. He's got a great voice. He does a podcast with Tommy Marquez called Talking Elite Fitness. And through there, until you had an unfortunate encounter with a razor that I see as you are starting to recover from, he gave you one of the best monikers I've heard in all of sports. And do you want to relate to the folks of what he calls you?
Sure. Back at the time, it was about 2014 or so, 15. I was helping them out with one of the regional shows, and we were just getting ready for one of the updates, and I was just going over the stats with them, and then Sean dubbed me the beard of knowledge. So
because you used to have a much beard, you.
So I did shave that off. I actually about a year ago with COVID and the masks, it was just getting irritating. I grew it back last winter, and then kind of got hot again, summer masks. So. But now I know it's hot today, but so I'm flirting with bringing it back again. So
But I have to say, of all the nicknames, it is one of the best that I've heard, the beard of knowledge. So it's kudos for being famous in the CrossFit community for that.
Yeah, it was an honor to get that from Sean. He comes up with a lot of great nicknames and one-liners. They always.
Oh yeah.
He always cracks me up.
Yep. I mean, if people go to YouTube and hear some of his calls from the CrossFit Games, they'll understand why. And also, just as a side note, he also does speed climbing on ESPN. So that's a plug to American Ninja Warrior, because his co-host on that is Megan Martin. So let's get back to it. This is not your full-time job. I mean, you have a full-time job as a civil engineer. So how much of your life is taken up by doing this work for CrossFit? And does it vary depending on the stages of the season?
Yes. Yeah. I like to say half the year I have 2 full-time jobs, basically. Because the game season basically ramps up in January after the holidays, and then the games are usually the first week in August. So about half the year, I'm pretty much working almost 2 full-time jobs. So I do my day job, civil engineer, and then I go home in the evenings, and I work in the evenings doing all the stats preparation, and so much that goes in with that throughout the year, and then on the weekends a lot too. So I'm pretty booked up half the year, and like right now it's kind of like my quote unquote off season. So I'm in kind of relaxing, just doing the normal day job, and but there are going to be some events coming up that I'll work this fall, and then maybe I'm still doing stuff with CrossFit. Like there's a lot of post-production, post-write-up articles and things that the media department's doing with CrossFit right now.
Are you working on the documentaries? Are you engaged in the documentaries as well?
Not as much. I'll occasionally get stats questions and such. So I haven't been too involved with the documentaries. It's more of the article write-ups, and then I work a lot with the social media staff that CrossFit has for like their social media accounts and all this stuff. Their Miles to Madison series they're putting out.
Right.
I've helped support stats research questions and such. So, but yeah, right now it's kind of my off season, but there'll be some other events I'll help this fall, and then come into the holidays I'll start ramping back up kind of my workload with CrossFit.
And just for folks to understand, because CrossFit is actually global. I mean, it's almost like a yearly Olympics in terms of the breadth of the people who participate in the open. And you may get a surprise participant who makes it through some of the stages that you have to now know from a distance. So first, give folks an understanding of how many athletes compete on average in an open, which is basically every week a workout is posted. You have from Thursday to Sunday or Monday to do it and post your results. And if you want to be competitive, you have to document it via video to post it. And then it's reviewed by CrossFit. And if you do well enough, you get to move on and whatnot. But how many athletes, I mean, really might you have to go through?
Oh, there's thousands potentially that would come on the radar that I would have to be ready for. But initially, like the open, as I mentioned earlier, anyone can sign up. And I think last year, I forgot the number offhand, but it was maybe 350,000 people.
Yeah.
Or worldwide. I think, I don't know these exact, but I think the most CrossFit had, it was in 2018 when there was like 450,000 maybe. So it's huge, and those are worldwide, and that's everybody from like
you and me.
Everyday CrossFitters to people just trying it out for the first time to the professional athletes that are going to go to the qualifying events and into the games. So so that's the big starting pool, and then it gets whittled down to the what they call semifinals right now, which are the qualifying. Or actually, I apologize, they added a new stage last year called the quarterfinals,
right?
Which they broke up. They used to be regions throughout the world that they would use, and now they broke it down to just the continents. But in each for Europe, there's two breakouts, and then in North America there's 4. So there's a total of 10 qualifying segments or blocks of the world. And so they take from the open, they take the top 10% of the athletes from each of those breakouts, and then they go to the quarterfinals. And the quarterfinals are an online competition where they do I think it was 5 workouts last year.
Yeah, over 3 days. Yeah,
and it was all online, and you submit the scores, and then from there you took the top I think it was 40 or 30 or 40. Oh boy, I can't remember.
Yeah, I know. There's so many numbers running around.
Yeah, top 30 or 40 men and women from each of those breakout regions into the 10 semifinal qualifying events. And then you also had team competitions that are going on as well, that went to those semifinal qualifying events.
And now let's diverge real quick to talk about one of the very cool aspects of CrossFit is that this year they also did, well, not just this year, but this year, the expansiveness, they brought back both age group. So we're talking from 14 to 18, because at CrossFit for 18, you age into the main draw of the games, and adaptive athletes.
Yeah, there's so many divisions now. One other, the other big part of the qualifying block is the age group athletes. And the teenagers,
and then the 35 and older.
Yeah, the masters, which we fall in. So the teenagers are 2 divisions, 14, 15, and then 16, 17-year-olds. And then the masters, they start at 35 years old, and they go by 5 age year blocks or divisions all the way up to 65 plus. They actually added a new division this year. So you've got all those divisions, and then there's a separate qualifying event for those age groups that go to the games, and that happens in the springtime. And then they take the top 20 from each of those age divisions, which I think it was 18 altogether divisions, 9 males and 9 females of the teenagers and the masters. And then they take the top 20 from that, and they go to the games, and they have their own competition that's happening at the same time there. So there's all those athletes that are being covered. Then you have the team competition with 2 men, 2 women, and they take the top 38 teams from all those semifinal qualifying events. They go to that. And then what you were also mentioning, which is new this year, which was really fun to cover, was the adaptive divisions. And those, they had just 3 breakouts for men and women. It was lower extremity, upper extremity, and neuromuscular.
Right.
And that's where if you're missing limb for the lower part of your body, or the lower extremity, and then upper extremity, upper limb missing, and then neuromuscular, or any multiple sclerosis or any type of physical ailment that you had that was a disability, but that was included. So there was actually more breakout divisions that when you could sign up for the open for the adaptive divisions, but they took those 3 specific ones to the games, and they held those for the first time this year. They had been doing demonstrations of adaptive athletes since I think 2013, actually, at the games, which would happen like at the games, but they're like on these side competitions, or they had all these at the games. It's a big fitness festival. They always call it like Lollapalooza or the Woodstock of fitness. So you've got all these tents and demonstration areas. So they used to have them compete in some of those demonstration areas since like 13 or 14. But this is the first time that they brought them out onto the competition floor and had their own scored division and crown champions. So it was really, really fun to cover them this year as well.
And I really want to urge people, I mean, you got to go watch these adaptive athletes. They were putting up numbers and times and what have you that I couldn't get to. Mm-hmm. There was one gentleman who was missing, I think he was the one who was missing his left arm. And so he gets to put a strap on his shoulder and his right arm is on the barbell, and he did a 500-pound deadlift, which is a lift from the floor to your waist of 500 pounds. Actually, it was spectacular.
It was even, I think, almost 515. I can't remember it was a lot.
It's somewhere in your logbook somewhere.
Yeah. When you get over 500-pound deadlift is one of the kind of benchmarks for male athletes. That's pretty good. It's like, I think bench pressing, if you get 300 pounds, that's a big benchmark. But like 500-pound deadlift's pretty significant.
So now all these divisions now you're doing the stats now for all these divisions because they were actually broadcast. They were streamed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so all the games athletes, there was, I can't remember the exact number, about 600 in total of all the divisions, the individuals, the age group athletes, and the adaptive athletes and teams. Roughly 600, because the number always varies because some couldn't make it to that actually competed, but it's around 600 athletes. So I for all the work during the season, I'm tracking their stats. And so come to the games time for all the qualifying athletes, I help consolidate a reference packet for all the media that are help covering the games. And it just helps. And I all the like basic bio information like age, height, weight, where hometowns, etc. And then past results, how they done in past games, their average event place, event wins. And so you think of it, I've kind of got a whole gamut of stats that I'll run on them. The more like the individual athletes, I'll do more detailed stats and such. In the age groups, I don't get as detailed, but I do. Over the years, I've added more and more stats to even the lesser categories that don't get as much coverage because it just helps a lot with the broadcast and providing context again, all the way back to my days of tweeting on the sideline at a qualifying event. It just, whenever you can help tell people what they did, why that was significant, because someone who's not seen CrossFit before, but maybe don't know anything about the athlete, but if you can just provide context of what they just performed an event and why it was really amazing, or if they should take note of that. I always love to get those bits of information in there.
Well, and that's got to be, for people who don't know CrossFit's whole mantra is that you need to be prepared for the unknown and the unknowable. Mm-hmm. So no workout should really ever be the same, though we do what's called retest. So there'll be a workout maybe from 4 years ago that they'll program, and you see if you've improved and if you've improved on that workout. But for the most part, as a sport, that happens maybe once a games deal. How difficult is that for you to sort of reconcile, okay, this has got this movement in it, which is similar to this from 2013, but now they've added this movement on top of it. which they didn't have in 13, and they've thrown in a rower as well. Now they got to row 1,000 meters and whatnot. When you're putting that together, are you trying to reconcile that against previous events?
Yeah, that's one of the other, with this media package that I put together, there's a lot of different types of information. Is one of the things that I really like to include is past results of similar events. And sometimes, like you laid it out well there, it's like each event, they're not, rarely is it the exact same. So there's going to be a little tweaks here and there, but there are similarities that occur. So I do always try to get past events that were similar in style, that may include 2 or 3 of the same movements that are in the event that they're doing currently at the games that we're going to be covering. So it's, I always package them up into different subsets. And so sometimes it's easier when it's more like we'll have a swimming event. So I'll have a results of their all past swimming events, or a biking event, or a running event, a long distance running, sprinting events, events that like obstacle courses. So sometimes there's unique events that come up just at the games that we do kind of get history on. So I'll help like put those together. And but usually all the events are going to be unique. So you just look for past events that are similar in nature, or the movement patterns, or the time domains, and you kind of help try to consolidate, get those lists together for the announcers to help pick favorites. And also it's good too, like during an event where like this is sports, things happen that surprise you, like someone who's done great in a sprinting event, it's all mid-pack, like what's wrong, what's happening? So that's something that want to be pointed out, or vice versa, like someone really improved in a certain, like they used to be a terrible long distance runner, and then they show up and come in the top 5, and I'm like, wow, then it obviously shows someone's really been putting in the mileage, improving in different events. So yeah, we help try to get all those different types of past workouts and kind of cluster them together to give everyone in the media at least an indication who's going to do well. And if they don't, or they do, then like, or not expected, that's a good story as well.
Yeah, because I got to imagine from a production standpoint, given the amount of athletes that you have out there, and you can't, so if there are, let's say 10 athletes at the floor at the time, there aren't 10 cameras out there. So you can't focus on each athlete at the time. You got to kind of cheat and say, okay, in this heat, for these types of movements, let's keep an eye on such and such. And she's really good on walking on her hands, but has problems, let's say, with a heavy barbell. Where this athlete, she's great at a heavy barbell, but we've never really seen her walk on her hands.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happens. For each heat, usually in the more traditional CrossFit events, there's usually 10 lanes, so there'll be 10 athletes. And what we do before is the announcers, a lot of our announcers have been doing it for a long time as well, and they know the athletes pretty well. And after looking at all the prep materials and just covering them themselves, we'll highlight 1 or 2 athletes before the heat. And if you'll notice on more like the individual events, if you watch some past CrossFit events, we'll highlight a couple athletes, and the announcers will talk about like, hey, I'm expecting them to do well on this. And so we'll do kind of a little cheat sheet on, or give the audience like highlight, hey, we expect them to do well. And then like as the event goes, then we'll see. And usually sometimes that pays out and that person we highlighted wins the event. And then other times we bomb out and like, whoa, who did this person where they come from? So,
right.
And it's interesting, but yeah, it's all part of again, it's sports. I love it when I always want to try to, nail it, get it right. But if I did that all the time, and then it would not be interesting. So,
sure.
So we want to see the variety when, or someone struggles, and then a lot other times too, the people will be dealing with injuries, which happen like in all sports. But CrossFit, that like someone's like really struggling on the run, like, wait, this guy's a great runner, and then the announcers are really good, they pick up on it. But I help out with that too, like we're tracking like who's doing like leading, but we're looking at the other athletes as well. Like, oh, is there some story we're missing here? So
Sure.
yeah.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. You've at the top of the leaderboard for the individual men, the individual women, and the teams for the last few years. You haven't really had any kind of mystery on that. It's always been second through third. That's been the race. There's not been a race except for the men this year. The last few years, there hasn't been much of a race on those sides.
Yeah, we've had, for those people that aren't familiar, both the men, women, and team competition has been dominated by a certain group the last 5 years. So, yeah. So, in the men, it was Matthew Frazier. Actually, he did not compete this year. So that was
he retired.
He won 5 in a row, which is the most ever for men. And it was very impressive, but he was just dominating the field most of those championship years. He did have one where he actually didn't get it until the end in 2019, which was pretty exciting. But he was very dominant. And then his counterpart on the women's side, Claire Toomey, she did compete this last year, and she won her 5th in a row, which is the most ever for women. So, and she did in dominating fashion. So those two have just stood out as like the best men and women in CrossFit.
Yep.
So it was, unfortunately, when they were in there, it was almost they were competing against each other even though they weren't, but just see who had the most event wins, who had the largest margin of victory. So, but
well, I think Tia surpassed him, because Tia is now the winningest individual in CrossFit history
for the events. Yeah, they're tied with championships. Yeah, it's interesting. They've got their stat sheets are so similar. It's very eerie when you look at their careers. That Tia was just 1 year behind Matt, and then they for those that didn't know, they trained with each other for the last couple of years, 2019, and then all of 2020 during the pandemic, and they just got better. It was insane.
It's amazing.
On the team side, CrossFit Mayhem Freedom, who is headed by Rich Froning, who was the 4-time male champ, who had the record before Matt and Tia both passed him. But he retired in 2014 from the individual side, but then he started a team, and he's been competing with them ever since. And they've won now their 5 championships, and they had 1 second place, which he was not too thrilled about. But so they're dominating as well. So it's been pretty impressive. But unfortunately, whenever you got, it's like in any sport, when you get a super team and dynasties going, then you kind of have to here, battle for second and third here.
Right.
So you got to keep things interesting. So.
Well, but I mean, it's still a storyline that you get to track. It's just to a certain extent, you've got to build the drama elsewhere for it.
Exactly.
And to that end, so let's talk about it. I mean, your job, obviously, I want to get into how you actually get the data from different parts of the world, but let's go to the games. The games is a week. It starts basically on a Tuesday this year. Let's take this year for an example. The age groups and the adaptive athletes started on Tuesday. The individual men and women started on Wednesday, along with the age groups and the adaptive. They had the day off Thursday, but the teams started on that day, and the adaptive and age groups finished that day. And then the teams and the individuals went Friday through Sunday. So what's your life like leading up to, and this all happened in Madison, Wisconsin. They were back to their normal spot after the brief interruption in 2020. So what's your life like, one, leading up to the games, once all the field is set, and then games week? I mean, how out of your mind are you?
It's pretty wild. Yeah, the games week is always the craziest, longest, hardest week of my year, every year. I think the last 10 years, and but I love it. Yeah, it's so fun. I mean, it's thrilling. I get the most satisfaction from it, but yeah, it is exhausting. But leading up to it, the qualifying events, the semifinal events, they end this year around mid-June, and they actually had a last chance qualifier that was an online qualifier for people that didn't qualify in the semifinals to make it in. And that actually was over the 4th of July weekend. So the field wasn't set until the beginning of July, but I had a good idea still from who was qualifying in end of May and June. So I get the rosters for all the individuals, teams, age groups. And then, so through the whole end of June and July, I'm prepping a big research packet for the media team, which includes the broadcasters, the field reporters that do the interviews, the floor announcer MCs that are out there on the microphone for the fans in the stands, help giving updates on who's leading, any of the writers for CrossFit that are doing writing for the game site, the social media teams. So that the information I put together kind of goes out to all those groups, and it's just a breakout of all the details that you can imagine. I kind of mentioned before, but a lot of this basic biostats, but then their past results, and then for more of the individual and team athletes, I'll get more personal, get more of their where they went to school, family, anything interesting, like past sports were they collegiate athletes, all the types of information. So kind of consolidate those into bullet points and such. So it's a kind of quick reference for announcers if they need to look up somebody and such. So, but a lot of the announcers, the ones that have been doing it for a while, have been kind of creating their own little reference packets themselves on the athletes, but they'll get the new one from me each year, and they'll kind of look at and they'll add on to update their information as well.
Sure.
But so I kind of get all this large packet of information together for everybody, and then during the week though, there is so much information. A lot of times you don't have time to reference it, so I get questions all the time from all these different groups to answer, and I just building this information, a lot of I have just in memory, or I know where I can look it up really fast. So I'm always answering questions all the time, during the live events, before, after, for write-ups, etc. So, but anyway, that's the whole research packet. But as for the games week itself, I like to get there the weekend before. So this year I got there on Saturday before, and then when I get there, I'm going around the whole the different fields of play, getting dimensions, specs on different equipment, because they like to bring out new equipment to the games that's unique, and that's always a highlight. It's one of the fun things about the games, where you get to do events that have never been done before with equipment that's never been used before. So whenever they show the graphics of the specs on those equipment, that's stuff that I went out and either measured myself or talked to the equipment reps, or they had kayaking this year, and so I found out the brand, got up the spec sheet and everything, just so we could flash that up there, so people wondering some background on the equipment. So a lot of the beginning of the week, I'm getting that type of information ready, getting any other final questions asked. There's a bunch of production meetings with all the media team that are happening during those days as well. So that's kind of the lead up. And then the games, like you mentioned, they started on Tuesday this year for the age groups. And so I'd help out a lot with the broadcast team that was covering that. We'd have two different kind of broadcast teams this year. One was more of the age groups, and then they covered the teams later on. And then another broadcast group that covered the individual events, and then some of the teams. So you've two different sets of producers, directors, announcers, floor reporters. So helping out two different teams there. So I'm kind of bounce back and forth. But initially I help out with the age groups and such. But then once the individuals and teams start, I usually rotate and just kind of camped out with that team the rest of the games forward.
So hold on one second, because this raises a question. Do you have clones, or is this really just you? Or do you have some assistant, something? Because this sounds like a lot of work for one person to take on and just sort of 24-hour windows?
No, it's just me. Yeah. Other people, I mean, there are other people that do stats and such that are doing it for other groups and such that are, but I kind of like the main guy for like the media team for CrossFit there. And so,
you
yeah,
should have been nominated for Spirit of the Games awards every year.
Yeah, it is fun. I really do enjoy it. So, but it's nice getting all those questions because, as I mentioned, I usually start building this work up in January. So I love the questions because it pays off all that time that I started, throughout half the year of getting all this background information. And so it makes it all worth it to kind of answer all those questions.
So again, for people who haven't watched the games, when they take place, again, using this year in Madison, they were in an open air stadium for part of it, and then they were in a coliseum for another part of it. Are you in a truck the whole time, or are you flitting back and forth between, let's say, the stadium and the coliseum?
Myself, I'm camped in the production trucks.
Okay.
And so we have a big little media compound just off to the side. If you would look at a map, you could see where they had the open air stadium, the field turf. We were just to the west of that. They're just off to the side. You could see a bunch of trucks, trailers, that cords running everywhere. That's where I was living at. Now our reporters and such, they are actually, they're moving. Obviously, they're doing the interviews. They're out on the different fields or in the Coliseum, so they move around. And then we have other support people that you don't see, but we have spotters and such that help identify who's in the lead or who's struggling in the back. So they rotate around. So, and we're all in communication with them, and we all have radios, headsets, so we can all talk to each other. But myself, I'm in a production truck, and I think a lot of people probably seen it watching regular sports like football, or they'll show let's go inside the truck, and then the producer and director wave. But so they're the ones running the show, and then also in there we have our the people who like switch the screens, because you always the what's being shown is always changed. Someone's doing that the whole time, so you have that person there. And then you have the graphics team that helps show all the graphics that are shown up on the that show up on the screen with the coverage. And I sit right in the back with the graphics guys, but I'm also in earshot to the producer and director to help talk to them, whatever is coming up, to help hey, here's a good emerging story. Let's make sure we cover this and such. So I'm kind of like a support backup role, and then I double help with the graphics team, double checking everything they're putting up. So it's pretty intense atmosphere in the truck. The first year I went in there, I was warned, are you thin skinned? Because if you have thin skin, you're not gonna last in a truck, because it can get very heated. Things are happening very fast. You don't want to make mistakes, because obviously it goes out on air, and so mistakes do happen, but when you recognize it, you correct it as fast as you can. Like, I'll take that down, that wrong stat, or something. So it's an intense atmosphere, but it's so fun to work. That first year I did it, I was just hooked, and it's a rush that happens. One of the main things I enjoy going back to the games is just helping in those trucks, covering the events live.
Well, it's got to be a different kind of rush than you got when you talked about earlier, watching the games on that sort of that first stream that you watched. I think you said in 2010. And the enjoyment you got out of there. So now it's a different enjoyment, because I have a feeling you're not exactly enjoying the games.
No,
I mean, you're in the weeds, so you're not looking.
Yeah, it is odd, because I see the whole games, but I'm not enjoying them. Yeah, and rarely do I only go back and watch them again if I needed to go check to see how someone did, or check some times or something on somebody. But I don't go back and watch, because I lived it. But it is a different feel, because I do miss some things, because I'm either checking a stat, my head's down in a laptop checking something out real quick for a graphic that I don't see everything, but it's still it's a different experience for sure. Yeah, I yeah, it's weird because now when I watch regular sports, I never can watch regular sports the same because I understand exactly what's going on. It's funny because I can guess what an announcer might say because I'm helping out our announcers too of like things that could be say or be good to say right now because just in that mindset, like, okay, this would be a good point to bring up. And like our announcers are really great. Yeah, they've been doing it many years as well, but it's always fun to try to get them some cool backup stat to drop in, like, because in a lot of those stats, you have to get that information to them instantly because it has to happen that moment. You can't say, oh, you got to go look something up and like, hey, yeah, back when a minute ago when they were doing that, this was really cool to say. Right? It doesn't, it's lost. So you've only got like a few minutes or a few seconds really to get in something interesting that's relevant because then the story moves on. So
and you're doing this. I mean, look, CrossFit as a sport has been around for more than a
15
decade,
years.
15 years.
Yeah, 15
that's right,
years.
because it was 15 for 15 this year. But it's still a young sport. So the production budget on this is not even a fraction of what NBC's was for last night's kickoff of the 2021 NFL season. So it's not like you have a gazillion cameras and a gazillion spotters and people in the booth with binoculars looking down and keeping track of everything. I mean, this is still being done on a fairly tight budget, and people are putting in, to my point earlier about you having clones, pretty extraordinary efforts to bring forth a very professional broadcast.
Yeah, no, it is amazing what we are able to put out each year. We did actually back in a couple years in 2018, I think was the largest we ever had on the media side, and it was actually we had a lot of people there, and it was great because you had a lot of backup support. But then CrossFit went through some changes the last couple of years, and it was kind of trimmed down. And but yeah, this year we kind of came back, but we weren't to that full size before, so kind of the do more with less kind of thing happens a lot. But it makes you sharp. But yeah, we still do have a lot of support people. I mean, I do play an important role, but there's a lot of other critical people that you don't see behind the scenes. The spotters on the field are really great there, and they're either like on the sidelines or in the Coliseum. They're up in the nest, kind of the high point where they're looking down binoculars, but they're all talking to us. So we do still have those people helping us get that information.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but it has been reduced a bit to what we had in the past. But yeah, compared to like a Monday Night Football game, that's like probably one of the biggest sporting events that happen like each
on a regular basis. I mean, the Super Bowl obviously is so over the top, but it's
and it's like football and at least in the United States, American football is kind of the key sport to gauge up. I think worldwide is obviously still regular football, soccer, but I don't know how that's all covered. I haven't
but I mean,
anywhere with that. But
international football doesn't. All they need is basically a wide angle. I mean, they don't need the type of stuff that even CrossFit does, given all the individuals and the individual movements and whatnot.
That was something that was a great point. That was real interesting when I first started in 2012. Because I had never been in a TV production sports truck, so I had no idea what was normal or not. So I went into that chaos and was like, and we were still kind of learning how to cover it. And we work with producers, directors, cameramen that are regulars. That's their full-time job, and they do other sports like NHL, college football, basketball, soccer. So they do all these different sports, and just talking to those people and talking to their peers, they would say that cross is probably one of the hardest sports to cover out of all of them. I think the only one they say maybe that's tougher is NASCAR, because there's just so many camera angles there and so many things that can be shown. But for CrossFit, because you've got endless possibilities or things to cover. And the other thing that people that haven't seen the sport before is that each event, and you had alluded to earlier, each event is different. There's different time limits on events. The field of play kind of changes. We do have the same general field of play, but the events are going to change, start finish line changes. So you have the cameraman and the producer director like ahead of time have to know where to put the right camera angle, right, position everybody. So it's constantly changing for each event. And then there's like 15 events this year for the individuals, and then teams have like 13 events. So it can be very challenging on the production wise.
Well, the best way to describe it is this year, because the first event was a mile swim followed by a kayak, and but then the following day, the following competitive day, they finished it off with basically a snatch event where people were just lifting weights for basically an hour. So, I mean, you have to cover people swimming and kayaking and then just standing there lifting weights, and you got to figure out a way to make both of them just as exciting as and interesting.
Oh yeah, and I give a lot. I'm not really involved too much with all those camera angles and decisions. That's the producer and director who have been doing it for the whole time I've been there. Mike Roth and Eric Barnhart. They're really great. There's other producers and directors that do the other, like the age group events and such. But those two guys, they've done this so long that they know kind of where they need to get camera angles positioned. We've built in a lot of flexibility over the years, so they do a great job getting the right shots that we want to see.
Right.
And another thing I think people probably notice, but yeah, it's happening with a lot of sports, is just the use of drones.
Right. I was about to say, yeah.
When we first started, it was we had helicopters at the games, but you can imagine like helicopter, that's going to be pretty pricey to rent one and have it flying around, and the gas and such. So, but the drone coverage now, it's amazing. Like we didn't even have a helicopter this year at the games, but we just had drones. And it was so funny because we had our compound and the drone pilots were just right outside. They just sitting on a chair and had a TV screen, and they would just launch them up and then just send them over. And all our aerial coverage was from drones. It's really impressive what they can do with those now.
Well, and I mean, that changed the whole experience for the swim and the kayak event, because the drones were able to get closer without affecting the event, where if a helicopter tried to get down that low, there's a chance that somebody's not coming back with their head.
Yeah, some turbulent waters. And
exactly.
It was rough enough as it was out there, but no, it's really enhanced it. And like the camera, you can still, it's not as clear and they get a little jerky and such, but it's gotten really, really good the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I'm really impressed, and just how you can get in those tight areas, and it's probably only get better. So it's great for the viewing audience.
So we're going to change gears a little bit, and I want to try to get some inside info. So as I mentioned before, CrossFit is all about the unknown and the unknowable. And one of the true, I don't know, hooks for the game is the gentleman who leads the team that programs the games. His name is Dave Castro. And everybody loves and hates Dave Castro. They love the sort of the theatrics he presents, but they hate the pain that he puts them through with the actual workouts. But one of his things is that I'm not going to give you the details, all the details about these workouts. When do you get the details? Because the production teams need to know what's going to happen. So when do you know what the workouts are going to be?
It's a great question. Yeah, it's always, everybody wants to know what's going to be the workout, because Dave traditionally he likes to leak out some information starting usually around the 4th of July. He'll start maybe hinting at what type of event you'll see. Like
just interrupt you again, because the Max Greenfield announcement was classic, because we have a classic couplet with an extra movement, so it's a triplet. So it was great.
So they'll send out. Dave likes to send out hints of different events. Like one year, like on the 4th of July, he posted a picture of a road bike, and that was it. And so everybody knew there's going to be cycling at the games this year. So everyone was kind of like, so that last month of preparation, they were jumping on road bikes, maybe getting a little more practice than what they normally would. And so. But so come that games week, the athletes will know maybe it varies each year. Sometimes maybe a quarter of the events, and they may not know they usually don't know the exact details. It's just maybe some of the background or the type of movement, but they won't know how long it is or how long they'll be. So, but as for the actual events, I don't find out until I get there, because it's always been a big thing to keep secret, because they don't want to get it leaked out to the athletes. And I agree with that, because I've really, as watching as a fan and not knowing, that's one thing I do miss about the games, is the way that Dave and his team lay it out. It's kind of like a play or a movie. It's like unveiled in different segments, and you have to, so you kind of, they try to create a plot and like, oh, what's going to happen, a mystery and unknown.
Right.
So keeping that from the athletes and the viewing fans, it's very important. I fully agree with it, because it adds to just the excitement of what's going to happen. So they try to keep everything very secret. And so the media team, we get our debrief usually like on that Monday night before, or the Monday before the games start, or the Sunday. So now actually the producer and the director, who I was talking about the camera shots, they get debriefed earlier, because Dave's planning the events out like all the time, but they kind of narrow it down come springtime, early summer. They've got a good idea what all the events are going to be. So they bring him in, because they need to plan, like, oh, we need to have a camera stand, that can go up 20 feet high in this corner, so we can catch this angle. So they do get briefed in earlier, so they can prep where the camera locations, equipment needed. But the media team, like us announcers, myself, that we find out like a day before, or the Tuesday or Monday, Tuesday before the events start happening. So, and then that's when I start cramming, or like getting those past results together of how these athletes did in these past results, to try to come up with favorites or potential favorites in each event. So that's kind of how that all happened. So then we'll know exactly what's going to happen, but then they'll during the week of the games, Dave then will announce the next event. Sometimes the athletes won't find out until like an hour before the event, or they may announce it, they have a day or so. So again,
like
it's kind of
like the free handstand push-up.
Yeah.
Which was crazy.
Oh no, it was fun when I saw it, because again, I saw that on Monday when they told us, like, oh, everybody, all our announcers, we kind of lit up, because we knew, hey, that's a new movement. They've never done this before in competition in CrossFit. So
it was insane.
Yeah,
that was insane.
It's the unknown and unknowable. It adds to that factor, which it's really fun. I love all the surprises and such. So. Yeah.
So have you had to develop relationships around the world with people connected to the CrossFit community in order to get the data that you need from folks who aren't in the United States or Canada or even North America? I
have, I've friends like in Europe and Australia on their respective media teams, because we'll have, like I said, our qualifying events in those continents and such. So they'll be based out of there, but I'll help do the stats on those athletes, and they will, since they live there and they'll be like trained with some of those athletes, or even know them personally, I can go to them and find out some information about them. So yeah, there's some good ties in Australia, and then in Europe for sure. Not as much in South America. A few people I do know there, but not as much, or in Asia. Those are kind of, in Africa, those are the kind of the emerging continents that are still, but they're the fastest growing in CrossFit. So I expect more from that. But yeah, I do know people in all the different parts of the world that help coverage or do media coverage for those qualifying events. So there's always someone I can usually go to help find background info.
Do you encourage the athletes to reach out to you?
No, I don't.
Okay.
What we do though, whenever the athletes qualify, we do send out a questionnaire. So I do kind of get a cheat sheet on them. And it's all voluntary. They don't have to fill it out, but I'd say 80%, 98% of the athletes fill it out. And so a lot of the times though, it's information on like the veterans that I already know. but it's good just to see. And sometimes they may add additional information they didn't in past years. So we do get that information from them, but sometimes athletes are not too forthcoming about it. So you got to go out and research it, or some athletes will write out like long paragraphs to each question. Others maybe a 1-2 word response or nothing. So
right.
Yeah. So those questionnaires are helpful, but a lot of that information we already know. So it just kind of backs it up. But where those questionnaires really help is from like the age group athletes and the team members. That helps out a lot, because I do know like a lot of the prominent age group athletes that have done well over the years have continued to come back, even the teenagers and then the team athletes. But there's always new people coming in the age groups and team divisions that I just don't have time to research them all in depth. So those questionnaires help out a lot with that.
Nice. So,
I'm like a super sleuther on the internet with social media. I get a lot of my information just on social media, because most athletes post a lot of information there. And it's interesting because they'll post it on their social media, but they won't add that in their questionnaire responses or what they post online to their stat sheet that every athlete has in their game.
Well, I'm sorry that we just exposed your secret. Now all of a sudden they're going to be like, oh, wait, if Chad's checking out my social media, I got to be careful.
Yeah, no, it's funny. It's pretty embarrassing. I don't even know what my ratio is, but I follow probably thousands of people on Instagram. So
I'm not stalking you. I promise I'm not. I'm just doing my job.
Yeah, but I tend not to try to seek out athletes though, because I don't want. I'll interview them if I like. I've done some interviews and such, but I don't usually go talk to too many of them. I kind of try to stay independent, neutral from them and such. So I do get their information from the questionnaires and such, but there's a lot of other media that do interview them. A lot of people that have podcasts that do interview the athletes, and I'll watch some of those and get information that way as well. So.
Well, then that answers my next question: is what your interactions are like with the athletes, and do you so what's your rationale between for sort of keeping them at a distance? Are you afraid there'd be some bias in what you're trying to build from a statistical standpoint?
Not necessarily. It's just there's so many athletes that it would be hard to try to keep up with all of them. And then I think if I interviewed a lot of them, I would maybe start to get favorites and want to get more information from them, or that may even skew maybe because I also provide picks on like who I think will do well. And so I try, and if like I admit I'm human, I do have my favorites and stuff of athletes, or when they do well, I'm really happy for them, but I don't I don't want that skew of like, oh, you should not follow this person because that's
right.
So I just, there's so many athletes, it'd be hard to kind of keep up or to constantly talk with them all. But it is important, because I'm glad others do it, because like I said, I do glean a lot of information from their interviews that they are. And there's a lot of different people that are on podcasts now that are interviewing the athletes, which is great. Yeah. That's where I get that information from.
So we're butting up against the hour.
Okay.
And I want to be no, because I can keep going, but I want to be cognizant of your time.
Okay.
But I do have a few more questions. One, you've been there 10 years. Mm-hmm. You've seen the sport from, I mean, they were in LA at the time you started, I think, and then you've seen it evolve into. It's a pretty big deal now, to a certain extent. Still a niche sport, but it's still a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
What have you seen has been sort of maybe the 2 or 3 biggest evolutions of the sport since you've been with there? And then where do you see the sport going in the next 5 years, especially since it's under new ownership, who have new and different ideas for how they want to build it?
No, that's always interesting to talk about, where they're going and like kind of seeing where they've come from. And I think probably one of the biggest things, and most people that follow the sport realize as well, just how these athletes have become professional athletes, the top elite ones, and just the specialization that they, or not specialization in certain movements, which they all have gotten better in like everything they do, but just how they train. They look at everything now. I think it was almost, you almost probably have to look back at Rich Froning. I think was the one who probably really got this trend going of literally almost training all day and just putting in tons of volume and such, which can be maybe detrimental to some athletes to try to keep up with that. But just people, because there was a lot of coverage of his training and what he would do. And I think that got a lot of people realizing, wow, we got to up our game. And so I just seen how these athletes have gone from just kind of treating this maybe a hobby to something that they do well at, but to where they are, some of them are just, that's all they do. They're professional athletes. And when I first started, a lot of them, about half of them had like regular jobs or part-time or full-time jobs, which is amazing. They could compete and do a full-time job. But then a lot of those full-time jobs over maybe a gym owner or a coach. So you're right there in the gym. So, but that is a lot of hard work. I don't want to say that's not, but it's more convenient to get your workouts in, coach a class, work out and such. So, but even then, like a lot of those athletes just gave up training and coaching altogether and just literally focused on training full time year round. And I think Matt Frazier brought it to a whole nother level with what he would do. And it was just amazing, just from every aspect of his game, from diet to sleep to recovery. It's just, and it was really interesting because he kept a lot of that stuff secret because he didn't want his competition to know, which I really respect. And now it's funny because since he retired, he's been on podcasts and like talking about like,
well, he's selling his own training program. So, exactly. I mean, he's giving all the secrets away.
It's fascinating because I was like, I would watch him. It's like, wow, I had no idea he was doing this level of dedication. I mean, and it was just impressive. So I think that's one of probably the biggest changes is just how serious the athletes have gotten with their training and everything. And every aspect. And if you're not, you're falling behind because others are. And it's like diets and just like everything. And then weaknesses too, like in the earlier days, you could not maybe be good in a certain event or two. And now it's like, if you're bad in it, you're just not going to make the cut. You're not even going to get to the games. So you can't, you got to have just even a minimal level of proficiency in all the movements now. So just seeing that was probably one of the biggest changes the last 10 years is just seeing how professional the athletes have gone. And now, we're going, I think a lot of the athletes now are kind of catching up to the Frazier model and the secrets. And so I think everyone's doing that now. Now they're getting that, all have coaches pretty much. They're doing training camps now, which is kind of a new, they always used to have training camps where they get together, maybe a couple of times a year, but now they're actually literally training like half the year with all of their athletes full time. And it paid off, I think, for a number of the athletes this year. Some still kind of are the lone wolves that are just trained by themselves, but they all talk about when you can get a training, another games athlete that you can train with, it really ups their game. So I think that's seeing the training camps are going to continue. I already saw where they're going to stand up another training camp in Florida, a bunch of like the teen athletes, and they're going to, and so there's camps. I think that's going to be the new thing. It kind of gets trendy, but it works. So it's kind of like, they always talk about like the NFL and stuff where whatever's trendy or whatever's new, everyone starts doing it, copying.
Well, the Patriot model. Patriots go to all the Super Bowls. Let's follow the Patriot model.
So I see the athletes keep doing that. And that's for CrossFit itself. I think, I'd love to see the sport grow and get bigger to its full potential. Where that is, it's hard. When I was always thinking it's going to be like X game level, but I think we could be bigger than that. It's hard to say. We're a niche sport. We're not there will be kind of a ceiling to it, but I still think you can get bigger. I know our deal with relationship with CBS Sports was really good. In 2018, we had a great coverage of that. And then we stepped back a couple of years when they had changes with the philosophy and with how they wanted to broadcast the games with the owner. the old owner, but now the new owner really wants to kind of ramp it back up. So I think we're going to see it grow more, see maybe our semifinal events, the qualifying events, even get more coverage. So but the big key is we still got to get through the pandemic and COVID that just affected the last 2 years, because half the, as you know, half the qualifying events last year were online still.
Right.
Because they couldn't hold them live in Europe and other parts of the world. So it'd be nice to get it back to where everything's live competition again for those events.
Yeah, because it really does. It changes the at-home viewing, but it also changes the environment for the athlete.
Exactly.
I mean, there's some energy from somebody else besides just yourself.
Yeah.
And for people who have never competed in front of an audience, it's very difficult to explain or put into words what kind of boost that gives you as an athlete, to have, even if they're not cheering for you, just to have that sound and that sort of that vibe in there does something to you mentally and physically.
Exactly. And it's the intimidation factor too, for me, like a rookie athlete when they're competing against there are these other big names that they've only seen on TV, or they never actually competed, but then they're right next to them in the next lane. That adds a huge factor. And just like if you're falling behind, if you're ahead, or maybe you go out too fast, whereas if you're just by yourself, you're nice controlled pace. So it is, the live competition, you can't beat it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what made, again, this is insider information if for people who don't follow the sport, but that's what made Mal O'Brien's win over Tia-Clair Toomey such a big deal. Yeah. I mean, because really you had a teenager beat the best that's ever been. Granted, it was just one event, but still it was a win. And sort of she planted her flag like at some point I'm going to be here.
That was one of those epic moments. Yeah, where it's like not passing the baton yet.
No, not yet.
She's still competing, but that was, and she was the youngest ever, or the youngest athlete to win an individual games event. So that was really special. Yeah, that was one of those things that I helped dig up really fast, just to verify, to get out there. Like, hey, this is history we're watching right here. So and it's just really impressive to watch.
So to that end, you've been there 10 years. I'm going to put you on the spot. Give me 3 of your most memorable moments.
Oh gosh, 3 memorable.
It doesn't even have to be a game thing. It's just something that happened that made your experience there memorable. Because again, as you said earlier, you don't exactly get to watch the games. You're working at the games.
Yeah, I would probably, the first one for sure was my very first event. And because again, I was like, I'd never done any of this. And it was 2012 CrossFit Games. And we started at Camp Pendleton, which is a Marine base, just north of San Diego, and right on the Pacific Ocean. And it was a triathlon where they swam, did a bike, and then a run. And we showed up, they had the media team, go on in a bus with some of the athletes were in a different bus. And we showed up at the beach, and I went into the TV truck. They had a little makeshift TV truck there. And that's when I met Mike Roth for the first time, who was the director. And it was crazy because, we were getting ready. It was kind of a cluster, trying to get everything organized, because that was back when didn't have as many resources and wasn't exactly sure how to cover everything. And so I sat right next to him. It was just myself and him in there, and we were covering the event, and I was IDing athletes right off the bat. It was just so wild. And then after they got out of the swim, then we jumped out and we drove over to the finish line to get the coverage of them finishing. And that was just it stood out like, wow, this is wild and crazy. So that first event was pretty epic, just watching that. When Tia-Clair Toomey and Cara Saunders, they had their famous lunge off in Madison. They were neck and neck, and they ended up where Tia only beat Cara by 2 points to win the games. that was just such a memorable moment because it was a lunging event where they had kettlebells and they had a lunge down to the finish line.
With the
And
kettlebells overhead.
yeah, and they went, Cara stumbled and Tia stumbled, and it's just a matter of a split second. And it was crazy because that's another one of the intense moments in the games is at the final events when we don't know who's going to win, because we have scoring monitors to help us and such, but you don't always know because the scoring doesn't come in at that exact moment. So I always prep my sheets and like, okay, what if scenarios and how it's going to work out. And that was just insane because they weren't first and second. There was other athletes finishing in front of them. So then the points vary. So
yeah, because nobody knew who won until Dave announced it.
Yeah, that was wild. Yeah. So that was a fun event to cover in the truck. Yeah. And I think one of my other favorite events was last year at the games, since with COVID, they actually took the games out to California again, to Aromas, California, which was near Santa Cruz. That's where Dave Castro had his family ranch where they held the first 3 games, and they brought it back there last year. And they held the ranch loop event, which was so fun to cover.
Oh, I was going to ask you about that. I forgot about that.
Yeah, no, that event was amazing. And we actually did have a helicopter, thank heavens, because we had our cameras. It was a 3-mile loop through this ranch out in California. It was very hilly, dusty.
It was a trail run, basically.
Trail run. Yeah, very steep and vertical in spots and very little flat area. You're going up or down. And so we had cameras at all these strategic spots. And it was so fun because it was the athletes went out, but we had a power problem with our cameras, and it happens occasionally. And we were freaking out because like we weren't going to be able to cover the event. But fortunately, and the helicopter was late getting there, and he got there, but then their camera couldn't come on, and then we were going to lose the athletes for a bit. And then fortunately, the camera came on just in the right time to where we could pick up the athletes. So they were going through the woods. And that's where a helicopter was helpful, because we did have drones out there, but they can't cover as much ground as a helicopter could. So, but it was just so challenging because there were so many trees and such, you couldn't always see. So we had cameras throughout the course positioned that we knew who was coming up next. But so we were trying to keep, like who's in the lead, and it fluctuated. And for people that didn't know about this event, it was a surprise. It was a 3-mile loop. And the athletes were said, okay, you're going to run this loop. And then, and they weren't told how long it was. They didn't know the course. So they were running it blind. And then they got to the finish line and everyone thought they were done. It was kind of at where they've had finishes before for similar events that they held out there. And when they got to the finish line, Dave Castro was at the line. He said, and then they finished, and then the athletes were acting like, oh, that was good. It was a good race. He said, you're not done. Go back and run in reverse. And so the athletes that finished first, they thought he was just joking. He said, no, I'm serious. And so it was like,
that's the famous Matt Frazier middle finger.
Yeah, Matt kind of let his feelings known to Dave, what he thought of that. And the other athletes are like, oh my gosh. So they turned around and they had to run the course in reverse. So it ended up being a 6-mile ranch run. But it was great because then they were going back, and the other athletes that were coming in and finishing, they were like, what are you, just cooling down? He said, no, we got to go back. So just catching all the reactions on their faces. And that was really cool because we didn't know about that. And we did actually practice it the night before with the test team. And they didn't tell the test team either. So the test team, we got to see a reaction of what would happen. And it was great because the people who finished first initially, or at least on the women's side first, and then like in the men, they kind of swapped around as well, even like in the practice. So it was a fun event. It was one of the most memorable because it was so challenging, and there's so many different events that are covered at the game. Some where we talk about the traditional CrossFit, you have 10 lanes. Those, even though the movements change, it gets routine on how to cover those. But I always enjoy the challenging events, like the runs, the swimming events, the biking events that are non-traditional, and that it adds like, because it makes it harder on us to cover it, but that makes it even more exciting in the trucks.
Yep.
So.
Well, that was example 1A, 1B, 1C of why Dave Castro is loved and hated at the same time. Because he announced that CrossFit did preview shows of the games, and he had announced, I'm telling you this, but nobody knew what they were telling you. I'm telling you this so that they don't think it's a gimmick at the games. And that's what he was talking about, was that he was going to surprise them at the end of the run, the first half of the run. Nope, you got to go back and do it in reverse.
Yeah, it was great. I loved the name when they're always creative with the names of the events, and they just called it the Ranch Loop. So okay, but you did it say how many loops? Or
right, exactly.
So,
it's just a loop.
So it was perfect. Yeah. So I really, that was one of the most memorable moments as well, I'd say.
Well, this was fantastic. I mean, I knew I was going to go over, and if you had anything else scheduled for your day, I apologize for making you late. But I might have to have you back at certain points during next season, just to sort of for updates. Maybe we'll do our own pseudo update show and base it around statistics and whatnot, because it's a tremendous sport. It's a tremendous exercise program. I'm not a Kool-Aid drinker, but I know firsthand what it's done for me since I started, and I wish I had started sooner. But it's from a sports standpoint, these athletes are unlike anything you'll see out there. They have to do things that no football player, basketball, hockey, baseball, tennis, doesn't matter, would ever think of doing. And they actually have to go out there and do it. And so that's what makes the games and the whole season so much fun. So if folks don't know about it, check it out. And know that all the stats that you're seeing are coming from one man's brain and very quick hands on a keyboard or on a pen and whatnot. But Chad, this was great. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and we will definitely set something up for next year, and we'll have regular updates.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. No, this is great. I loved it. Yeah, we just scratched the surface. Hopefully,
I know.
Too much into the weeds. But
I know.
Yeah,
because I really did. I mean, as everybody knows, I always prepare questions, and I have them right here. And I didn't get to like 2 or 3 of them because I knew how deep down the rabbit hole that might bring us. Yeah. So,
but no, I definitely love to do this again, and we can make it regular. Or a couple times during the season. That'd be great. So
that would be great. You know what? We'll plan for each of the open events, because I take part in the open every year as long as I can do them and whatnot. So maybe we'll start with that and then work our way down the line.
Okay. Sounds great. I love it.
All right. Well, fantastic. So until next time, you take care. For everybody who's tuned in, make sure you check out Chad. All his various links and social media items are down below. He really does some phenomenal work for a solo on these statistics and what have you, because he is keeping track of a lot of information. So check it out. Check out CrossFit. It's amazing. It's so much fun. It's not intimidating once you get in there and you get the crowd around you. It actually is something you get addicted to, because you see all the results pretty quickly. So make sure you check it out. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have questions or comments, you can leave them below. Just let's keep them sane or insane, depending on how you're feeling today. It doesn't really matter. But I do want to thank you again. You've been watching Did You Know That? This is the channel where we talk to interesting people about interesting and sometimes annoying topics, or like today, some fanboy topics that we get to geek out on. If you liked it and you want to check out future episodes, make sure you hit the subscribe button somewhere down there with the bell, so you get notified when content goes up on Thursday mornings. So for Chad Schroeder, my name is Sean O'Rourke. Everybody out there in the ether, take care until we see you next time.